Hello and welcome to the Raising Killin podcast. My name is Ma Schneider and I blog at raisingkillin.org, where we curate resources for parents raising children with disabilities. As always, remember the content on this podcast is for your information only, and if you seek advice for your specific situation, to contact a trained professional. We have less than a month to go for Day at the Lake. This is our first live in-person event that brings together parents, teachers, and other service providers to learn about resources available in Dyersburg, Tennessee, as well as the state of Tennessee. This event is made possible, and this podcast is brought to you by the Changemaker sponsorship of Security Bank. In today's episode, number 93, I interview Debra Ruh, who is founder of Ruh Global Impact and Billion Strong. So without further ado, put your feet up, grab that cup of coffee, and get ready for some awesome conversation. Debra Ruh, welcome to the Raising Killin podcast. Debra is a global disability inclusion strategist. Her work is concentrated as CEO of Ruh Global Impact, as well as a nonprofit which is called Billion Strong. So without further ado, Debra, welcome to Raising Killin.
Oh, thank you so much. And thank you for inviting me to the show. I think it's really important that we have shows like this because we need all these different voices and the diversity of voices. So I really appreciate being on the show. Thank you.
So guys, me and Debra just had a brief conversation before I hit the record button. And in that conversation, we talked about visual descriptions and the benefits of describing ourselves to the listeners, just as a way for us to kind of connect perhaps on a deeper level, Debra.
I do the same thing on my show, Human Potential at Work. And we were talking about off air that I actually talked to some colleagues that were blind, and they said, boy, they really do appreciate when we take this step because they feel more included. So I am not an old woman. I'm a mature woman with gray and purple hair. And today I have on a blue hat and gray and blue. I have on a real pretty blue Indian dress. And I am a white woman, and I have some lights around my head today because there's some Christmas lights in the room.
So I'm Ma Schneider. I am a woman of Indian heritage. I have brown skin, black hair, and today I'm wearing my work scrubs. That is my visual description. So without further ado, Debra, can you please tell us more about the catalyst that set you on the trajectory to joining the disability community and how that happened?
Yes. And once again, thank you so much for having me on the show. It is really an honor. I didn't know what I was going to do as a kid. And so when I grew up, I fell into the mortgage banking industry. And when I was in the mortgage banking industry, I'd been married and I had my first child, and she was born with Down syndrome. And that I knew of, I didn't know any other person with a disability. I didn't think I knew anybody else with a disability. It was just brand new in my life. And so I was really discouraged that I did not find out my daughter had Down syndrome until she was 4 months old. But when this came out, how people treated us so differently, like somehow my daughter was broken. And instead of saying, congratulations on your baby, it was like, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. And it just sort of broke my heart a little bit because I do have perfect baby girl. That's 36 now. So society acted odd when this happened to me. And so it just really sort of woke me up to, a little bit more about this community. And then whenever my daughter reached middle school, I started hearing she wouldn't be included in the workforce and she can't do this, she can't do this. And I was like, confused why they thought that, because they weren't even looking at her as an individual. Even at the time when they were saying these things, my daughter actually was working part-time at Wendy's, holding, a marketable position, and doing well with it. So I decided to enter the field at that time. What I didn't know when I entered the field, because I thought with my professional experience, I could come in and I could add value and I could employ people with disabilities and learn about the field. But I didn't feel very welcomed into the field. It was almost like, no, we don't need you. We got it, which, by the way, none of us got it. We all need each other. Yes. But I also learned as I walked this path that my beautiful husband of 40 years, he also was a person with disabilities. He had been hit by a car in Buffalo, New York when he was 11 years old and died on the spot. They brought him back, went into a coma for 10 days. Then he didn't go back to school for months. So what I didn't know, which I don't care, I would have still married him, was that dementia would come for him early in life, because even though our beautiful brains can rewire, a big part of his brain was destroyed, so he aged differently. So he passed away last year after a 7-year journey with dementia. And then also what I got to learn was I myself am a person with disabilities. According to law, I have ADHD, which, by the way, so do 65% of other business owners. Many people with ADHD and dyslexia will become business owners because we don't always work well with micromanagement or people telling us what to do. We're creative. So even though society has legislatively said I have a disability, I don't really buy it, but okay, I also am part of the community. I think actually what we need to do a better job of is supporting people that are in need and making sure people have what they need. But sorry for that really long answer, but I just wanted to explain to the audience I had to sort of learn that I was part of this community and now celebrate that.
So guys, Debra's podcast that she was referring to, I want you guys to know that is actually called The Human Potential at Work. So please go ahead and give it a listen. And I actually want to give a shout out, even though it's in the middle of the show, to Eric Jorgensen from True North Disability Planning. He is the gentleman that told me all about you. And thank you, Eric.
I love Eric, and what beautiful work he's doing. But this is the way we do it. We help each other.
Debra, tell us more about the work being done at Ruh Global Impact.
And yes, and I will say that when I first moved into the field, I'm a technologist. I just come from a long line of technologists. And so I created Tech Access, TEC Access, and what we focused on was making sure technology was accessible to everybody. And so the websites were accessible or the apps accessible. And the majority of my employees, about 90%, were people that self-identified as having disabilities. And then I ran that company until about 2011, and then I merged it with another accessibility group and then created Ruh Global Impact. I was just going to do that as a placeholder to get a real name, and it sort of got away from me. So that's our name. But what we do is we work with major corporations, major brands, Amazons of the world, the Microsofts, the AT&T, really big global brands, to meaningfully include people with disabilities in their workforce, but also to make sure their customers with disabilities are being included. Their investors with disabilities are being included, their vendors. So we really try to help them look at it holistically, including also from the branding and marketing perspective, which is what we're good at, because society right now is tired of corporations doing things that hurt us. We're tired of it. And we have something that's going on called consciously quitting. Consciously quitting. Your best workers, if you were playing bad and we're seeing you in the news do really bad things, or you were seeing sexual harassment suits that you're not dealing with, you're not including people with disabilities, whatever you're doing, people are consciously quitting from the large corporate brands because they don't want to be part of it anymore. And so we're guiding the corporations how to be better corporate citizens. But at the same time, we also work with UN agencies, we work with governments, and we do a lot of partnering. So I'm now at a very high level in this field, talking at really big organizations like the World Economic Forum or Zero Project, or really big efforts that are being made. And the big efforts are very important, but we all have to be included all the way to the local levels. So it is very strategic working with these corporate brands and making sure they include us. But we recently, 2 years ago, had a major success for our community in that under the efforts of Dr. Caroline Casey and help with people like me, we got 500 major CEOs of major corporations all over the world to come together at the World Economic Forum level and agree to meaningfully include people with disabilities. Yay! But now we have to execute. Now we have to actually do it. So that's where I play, but also with Billion Strong. Billion Strong is the world's first global identity organization where people with disabilities can come together with pride and talk about their lived experiences with disabilities. Even if I wasn't neurodiverse, ADHD, I'm still part of this community because I'm a mother and a wife of, so we count us all. But Billion Strong is about us all coming together, highlighting our voices. Like, we want your podcast to be on Billion Strong because we want to all come together. And it's ridiculous exercise. We have 1.3 to 1.7 billion people with disabilities, and that's not including people that love someone with a disability or people in society that believe all human beings should be meaningfully included.
So, Debra, as a mom raising a son with a disability, a major concern would be, how does he take his skills post-secondary education? How does he get into the marketplace? How is Billion Strong forming that? How is Ruh Global Impact informing the decision of those employers that, hey, let's give Kellen, let's give Sarah, let's give that kid out there with a disability a chance?
Yeah, and that's a great question. And what we've done is the reason why I created Billion Strong, and once again, let me say, I have other founders involved, pretty much everybody at Ruh Global Impact, because we're a small team. We're like 7 people. Pretty much everybody is created because it's going to take us all to create Billion Strong. But and Billion Strong's at 501c3 now. It's fully licensed, it's got everything. But the reason why I created Billion Strong, because it was my idea, was because of the valuable 500, which I mentioned. 500 corporations coming together at CEO level and going, okay, we'll include you. But we have to be discoverable. You remember, we've got 1.3 to 1.7, but 75 to 80% of people with disabilities have hidden or invisible disabilities. I have to tell you, maybe you can guess that I have ADHD. I didn't have coffee and I'm so high strung, but it's also good for being an entrepreneur, right? But so the big majority of our community, we have hidden or invisible disabilities. You can say this about someone living with autism. You can't always, people sometimes think they know. Yeah, whatever. You don't know. You don't know that I live with an anxiety disorder. I do. It's, part of tied to the ADHD. So that is complicated. So let's just take a moment to say that's very complicated. You don't even know the people we're talking about, and people will not identify, definitely in the United States, because they feel that you are going to discriminate against them. So they will not identify. In other countries, they are almost forced to identify because of the way the governments work, if you want supports and stuff. But it's different in every single country, which is very confusing as well. And so the reason why I created Billion Strong was to make our community discoverable. And let me tell you why I'm using that word. The reason why I'm using that word is because we have 500 corporations with, I think they represent 22 million jobs that actually want to find your son with disabilities. They are committing to hiring people with disabilities, but they need 75 to 80% of us to actually admit that we have lived experiences with disabilities, and we're not. So I was just really concerned that how can they be successful if they can't find us? So maybe they can find your son because you're doing a podcast about it, right? Maybe they can find my daughter, Sarah. And once again, just to make things a little bit more complicated, We are a very, very, very diverse group. Some of us are blind. Some of us are deaf. Some of us are blind and deaf. Some of us are blind, but we have hearing loss. Some of us have cerebral palsy. Some of us, we are a gigantic group. We also include chronic health. We include anyone with mental health issues, which if you're a human being in your life, sadly, you're going to have some mental health problems. So it's such a gigantic community. And what's happened to date has been that our communities fight each other. And then we fight other diverse communities like the LGBT community or the women community, because women are supposed to be the largest minority in the world, except sometimes we're actually the majority. Sometimes there are more women. Right now, I believe this moment, men have an edge on women. They are a little bit more men than women. But women are a minority because we have not properly included women. We do not pay women right. We don't include them on boards, all the gender issues. We still are being paid grossly less than men. Okay, now you take it and you take a woman of brown skin like you as opposed to a woman with white skin like me. I'm going to make more money than you. Why? I don't know why we do this stupid stuff. So, and then you start going into the disabilities and the diversity of the other groups people are being disenfranchised, and we're more and more and more disenfranchised. So now what we have to do is sort of come together and say, all right, so how do we get this right? Well, we got to get together. We got to identify that we are proud. And don't feel bad for me because I'm a person with Down syndrome. Don't decide I can't add value because I'm blind. And so, all right. So that is why we created Billion Strong, billion-strong.org. But I want to talk to also I live in the United States. I believe you live in the United States as well. Eric lives in the United States. There's so many beautiful things about the United States of America. I'm very proud to be a citizen here. But the reality is, once we leave our borders, people with disabilities are really, really, really in trouble, so badly in trouble. So one thing I'm really trying to encourage my beautiful fellow Americans is to realize that you have privilege because you were born in this country, and you need to step up and you need to also help and fight for other people's rights outside of our border, which is what shows like yours does as well. But I know I often talk about these topics in a really big way because this is my work, but we need everybody pulling together now. And that's why we created Billion Strong. We did not create it to compete. We have 100 countries now that have partnered with us of organizations of persons with disabilities. And we just want to highlight what everybody's doing so that the money can start flowing to us and so that we can start being employed and included, and education can be more accessible to us, and workforce can be accessible. And I had a really large employer one time say to me, "What are you suggesting, Debra? Are you suggesting we have to hire your daughter with Down syndrome in our company that does all IT stuff?" And I said, well, okay, what I'm suggesting is that you hire people that are qualified to do your job, but look beyond the norm and make sure you're hiring people that have lived experience with disabilities, because there's value to you as an employer. We know they're more creative and more innovative, and we know they're natural problem solvers because they haven't had a choice. The world is not accessible to them. They have no choice. They have to be creative. And so that's just a little bit. I'm sorry for my long answers.
I'm going to go ahead and deconstruct that because I think self-identifying with pride that you have a disability is, where does that start? Now, I have an opinion, obviously, on this, but I'm interested in knowing what your opinion is.
Well, where does it start? I think where it has to start is we have to convince our community. Have to be brave. Oh, yeah, I hear you, Debra. But you know what? I can't be brave. Am I being discriminated? I mean, just saying, sometimes it's hard to. Okay. But also, we have to stand up for our rights together, I think, in a little different ways. Because now what we have, and this is a problem. I'm going to say this, I'm going to disagree with myself. We have to be discoverable. We have to be able to show these employers that are specifically looking for people with disabilities maybe a little bit to check some boxes and to fill quotas, but regardless, they are looking for people with disabilities. They really, really are. So LinkedIn, I love LinkedIn, and they recently, I guess it's been about a year or so, what they did was they created something that if you're looking for a job on LinkedIn, which is where a lot of people go, you can actually say in your profile that you are a person with a disability, and you set it in a way, and the only people that can see that is recruiters. Nobody in your following, none of your friends can see it. So there's a way, and it's not just for disabilities. You can also check that you're a person that's part of the LGBTQ, community. You can say that you're, things to make it easier for employers to discover you. Okay. So it's about, once again, maybe understanding there might be value to me in disclosing that I have a disability because I'm looking for a job. And I know all these corporations are saying, blah, 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 I'm looking for you. Okay, then I'll do it. And I could do it on LinkedIn safely. But we also see other really big groups like, say, Indeed, which is a big job portal. They're really committed to making sure that we can be seen and discovered. But once again, none of these efforts will work if we ourselves won't come out and say, I will identify as having ADHD, even if you judge me for that and think, wow, you're broken or whatever. So the way to change it is we're going to have to walk like that. We're going to have to convince ourselves it's safe to come out. And by the way, the 20 to 25% of us that can't hide our disabilities, like my daughter with Down syndrome, they don't have those same choices. So I would have to say to our 75 to 80% of us, maybe we need to be a little bit braver for those of us that can't hide, right? And so, but at the same time, I know it's difficult. But the good news is these big corporations now, they're looking specifically for you if you will disclose you have a disability. So now there's a reason for me to do it. But before, maybe there wasn't a reason before. But at the same time, I'm not saying it's not complicated every step of the way.
What about media representation? What role do you think that has played with regards to decreasing that stigma that traditionally surrounds or historically surrounds disability?
Yeah, and that I'm very excited about because we're actually making great progress, especially here in the States, but not just in the States. We're seeing powerful things happen in the UK and other countries too. So what's happening they are taking that very seriously. It's complicated and confusing. For example, whenever you're an actor, you act out a part that might not have anything to do with your real life. I look at a show that I've always enjoyed. It's Frank and Gracie, or Grace and Frankie or something. It's, I forget the name of it, but Grace or Frankie and Grace. And it's wonderful with Jane Fonda and Lily Tomlin. And I can't off the top of my head remember the two amazing men that are playing the parts, but they're playing parts of two husbands that finally admitted they were gay. Okay. Well, the two actors are not gay that are playing gay men. Okay. So we are saying in the disability community, stop using other actors. We are disabled actors, include us. And there was a big fight with The Rock because he played a war veteran where he did not have a leg. So he had a prosthesis. And during this, I didn't see the movie, but during the movie at one point, he actually saves a bunch of people by letting his prosthetic leg come off. It was clever how they did it. But they also criticized Rock for playing a role that an actor with disabilities that uses a prosthetic could play. But then there's some realities that we have to remember. The realities is if Rock, I think, I forget his real name, Dwayne Johnson, maybe, I'm a fan, but he is a big box office draw. When you put him in a movie, people will come just because they love him. If you put an individual with that doesn't have any kind of name, the movies don't get funded. So we're having a lot of arguing and fighting about that. What does it mean to be an actor? But at the same time, we're seeing some really beautiful progress. I'll give a shout out to Netflix, Heather Dowdy, who is, they are really focusing at Netflix on giving us really powerful, empowering content for that representative of our community. Like, I don't know if you've seen Attorney Wu. I think it's Attorney Wu. Anyway, it's beautiful. And it's a Korean woman that has autism, that is a lawyer and very open about it. And they just, the last episode, they took on dating. Dating is so hard. And they're like, well, in the show, there was a man that was dating a woman that had intellectual disabilities. And so he was accused of raping her. So they took on this, and it was so powerful. So actually, there is some beautiful changes happening in our media and our marketing. I don't know if people are seeing it. I'm seeing it, but I'm out there looking for it too. But we're starting to see a lot of efforts. But I think as society still, we're sort of going to have to decide, can an actor play any role? Or if there's a role for somebody that's LGBT, can it only be from that community? So I think the society is being rethought right now. And I don't know that answer.
I think we're in the middle of it. Really exciting change. Yeah.
Yeah. And the good news is, maybe right now we do have to be more deliberate about making sure people with disabilities are visible on our screens, on these movies and stuff right now. And then we can shift more into, how do we do this better in the future? But maybe right now we need to be very deliberate about including people at a time when we have not historically done it.
Any ideas as far as how does disability inclusion happen more at a foundational phase at schools?
The employment and the education, they're not talking to each other. They're not talking to each other. And so the reality is, we're not really doing a good job educating many people with disabilities. I loved my daughter's teachers, but I felt like my beautiful daughter, was babysat often. I remember when they wanted her to go get a job, and I'm like, well, I really think we should teach her to read first, please. Can we teach her to read? She'll have her whole life to work, but she did learn to read, but it was almost like the school wanted her doing something. And so we got a lot of problems with education. And I find that the education that we are giving or not giving to students with disabilities is another reason why we're not moving effectively into the workforce. We're not doing a good job with the colleges. And we're finding that education is not meaningfully talking to employers. So employers are their customers, right? Because you want to educate the workforce and get them, right? They don't talk to each other. So we're starting to talk about this. There are some efforts being made, but we still don't see it happening. It feels often, especially if you are an individual with intellectual disabilities like my daughter, cognitive, you are not being prepared for the workforce. You're not. So once again, it's a flux. It's everything that's happening. And we can sit around, and I just want to say this one comment. I was talking to this beautiful soul, this woman that's fighting for the cause like you are and I am, and we all are. And she said, I was talking to a legislator in my state, and I told him all these things that were wrong with the education and how you can't, transition's ridiculous, getting a real job, forget it. I told him all these problems. I said, okay, all right, okay. And she's like, what do you mean? I said, all right, well, what were some of the solutions you gave him? Well, I didn't. What do you mean? We can't just talk about how it's all broken. What are we going to do together to fix it? We can't just keep talking about how broken it is. It's broken. But what are we doing together to help because the employers are willing to do it. They've said, I'll do it. But is it reasonable for me to expect for you to be qualified for the job? I think it is reasonable. All right. How do we make that happen? Right. So the front, the back, the middle, and everything is just broken.
Debra, in conclusion, what would be your call to action to parents or listeners out there? What is the one thing that you would want them to do?
Thank you for that beautiful question. And I am bad about asking for myself, but please, please, please join billion-strong.org. It's free. But we so need your voices. We need your opinion. We need your children. We all have to come together. And what we want is, once again, I want to put your podcast out there, right? We're showing voices from all over the world. And we're talking about these issues. But the more we get together, the more we come together, the stronger we are. And I'll give you an example. My daughter, once again, has Down syndrome. My daughter lives in the United States. We live in Virginia, thank God. But during this horrible pandemic, where I lost 2 brothers and my husband, but during these times, if my daughter lived in Alabama and she got COVID-19, she would not have been eligible for life-saving equipment if somebody that didn't have Down syndrome needed it. That's not okay. That is not okay. That is not okay. They have that law in their books. So how do we change this? We all come together. So please consider coming to billion-strong.org, volunteering with us, donate for us, help us find the voices. Let us show you who is doing what in this field, because a lot is being accomplished. But now we come together during these changing times to not only talk about the problems, but to start coming up with solutions that work for all of us. And if we don't do it, we're not being responsible for the community and for our children. But also, if we did this right, we could be the first community that showed all of the other disenfranchised communities how we could really get it right. And I'm telling you, people are now listening. The World Economic Forum, the World Health Organization, the World Bank. I mean, they really are paying attention. Global Compact, the ITU, they want it to work, but they need us to help them make this work. So sorry, I'm just way too chatty today, but
we all tell our individual stories as part of our advocacy. But if we need to up-level that, if we actually need change, we need to communicate as a community. And I have to say, in addition to listening to you, Debra, I have to say that Lemondre Pough's message was such a powerful message. As the side that we need to help to self-identify, if that is our lived experience, was just a really powerful message. And that this is not about us as individuals, it's about the community, and that's how we power change.
Yes, and can I just make a confession? Whenever I was creating Billion Strong, my husband was dying. My daughter was in a traumatic situation. I was trying to help her. And but I really believed in Billion Strong. And I thought this was a way that we could come together and not compete and stuff. And also, Billion Strong will be having funding there for our community. We'll be listing projects. We want it to be a place where we can all find each other and share. I mean, if we only hired each other and shared with each other, we're 1.7 billion people. My gosh. But I do want to confess that when I decided to create the nonprofit, Billion Strong, I thought, okay, I'll just be the CEO, and then I will select another CEO in the future. And somebody said to me, a friend of mine said to me, oh, good, another white woman that doesn't have a disability is starting a nonprofit to help people with disabilities. And I looked at him, I said, you got to be kidding. If everything I have done, you're going to say that to me. And I do have a disability. But at the same time, I heard it and I thought about it and I prayed about it and I meditated and I thought, he's right. Right now, we've got to be deliberate. And so I asked Lemondre, I always wanted Lemondre to be the CEO, but I said, Lemondre, will you become the CEO? You should be the CEO, not me. And he said, absolutely. And I agree with you. His voice is so beautiful. Lemondre self-identifies as a Black African-American man growing up in the southeastern part of the United States. He also is a man born with muscular dystrophy, and it is progressive. So, they keep saying he was going to die before he was 3, before he was 7, before he was 11. Luckily, he's 49 and beautiful and amazing, but he needs around-the-clock caregiving. He cannot shake your hand. He has limited mobility from his shoulders down. But let's talk about who this soul is. My God, this man is powerful, powerful voice, beautiful voice, and a wonderful representation of who we are.
Debra, thank you so much for your time. As I said, an absolute honor to talk to you, and really excited about the way this movement is moving forward. And guys, again, that's billion-strong.org. Check them out. Debra, you take care and have an amazing day.
Thank you for having me on your program. I appreciate it.
As always, thank you for listening along on the podcast today. Remember, our live in-person event, Day at the Lake, is coming up on August the 26th. For more information as far as speakers are concerned, check out our Facebook page, Raising Kellen, and our website, raisingkellen.org, has more information as well about the event. Today's podcast, as well as our live event, is brought to you by the Changemakers sponsorship of Security Bank in Dyersburg, Tennessee. So until we see you guys the next time, as always, remember, get to the top of your mountain. This is Marsh Naidu signing off.